Hello, everybody, and welcome to ZTV Live. I'm Susan Mulligan-Fleischman, and I'm so glad you're with us tonight. Today's Wednesday, July 22nd, and Jane Collins is with us tonight with her Ask 10 Questions program, and her guest is Jordan Costen of SafeSpace NOVA, and their conversation is coming up in just a few minutes, so stick around for that. First, we'd like to bring you a couple of words from our sponsors. This episode of ZTV Live is sponsored in part by Taste of Asia, which includes Japanese, Chinese, and Thai food. Try their excellent sushi or one of their specialties, including eggplant and garlic sauce, pineapple fried rice, and hot and sour soup. Mention the zebra for 15% off your order. And by Dishes of India in the Bellevue Shopping Center in Alexandria, winner of the Zebra Reader's Choice Award for Best Indian Food. Check their website for daily specials at dishesofindia.com, available for curbside pickup or delivery. Mention the Zebra ad for 15% off your order. And by Tempo Restaurant, Alexandria's best-kept secret on Duke Street in the West End. Specializing in Northern Italian and French cuisine, award-winning Tempo has indoor dining again. Visit temporestaurant.com to see their menu, including beer and wine to go. Mention the Zebra for 10% off meals on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. If you'd like to sponsor ZTV Live or place an ad in the Zebra newspaper, please send an email to ads@thezebrapress.com. We'd love to have you on board. And we have just a couple of newsworthy items tonight. Late last week, the City of Alexandria opened a number of cooling centers to help protect residents from the extreme heat. Now the city has decided to keep these cooling centers open through tomorrow. So if you're outside and you're feeling overcome by the heat or your house air conditioning is not working, you can go to a couple of places. The Oswald Durant Center on Cameron Street, T.C. Williams High School Minnie Howard campus, or the Torpedo Factory Art Center. Oswald Durant Center is open 8 to 5, as is the T.C. Williams. The Torpedo Factory Art Center location is open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. All the locations are taking precautions against the coronavirus, which includes social distancing, body temperature check. Please wear your face masks. You know the drill. The City of Alexandria's food waste composting stations will reopen at the Del Rey and Old Town farmers markets on Saturday, August 1st, and at the 4 Mile Run and West End markets on Sunday, August 2nd. Beginning August 1st, composting restarts at farmers markets during the normal operating hours. See thezebra.org for more details in the article. Have you filled out your 2020 census? Every household in Alexandria needs to be counted. The census helps determine how the government should distribute funds, where businesses should be built, and how much more, and much more. So the information collected in Alexandria goes a long way toward helping our community. Later this month, census takers will be visiting households that have not yet completed their census. The visits will last approximately 10 minutes. The questions asked will be easy, and it is safe to provide the information. Census takers will be required to wear masks when visiting, and they'll be following CDC guidelines and local health guidelines as well. The census takers will most likely be Alexandria residents. Some will be bilingual. If someone visits a household and does not speak Spanish, the family members may request another census taker visit. All who visit will carry materials in multiple languages to help identify themselves and their purpose. If no one's home when a census taker stops by, the person will leave information about how to respond by phone, email, or online. Census takers will be identified with a valid government ID with a photograph, expiration date, and the U.S. Department of Commerce watermark. For more information, please see the story in thezebra.org. And thank you for practicing your civic responsibilities. And now I'm so happy to bring on Jane Collins. Hi, Jane. Welcome back to ZTV Live.
Hi, Susan. It's good to be back. How are you?
I'm very good. Glad to be back in town this week after a nice little break last week.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm really glad that Alexandria is opening those cooling stations. You had mentioned if your air conditioner broke, ours stopped yesterday.
Oh.
We have 2 air conditioners. We have a 4-story townhouse, and I was up on the top floor, actually where I am right now, and it got so incredibly hot. I found out it was 84 degrees. You would have thought I would have figured that out beforehand, right?
Yeah.
But as it turned out, we had a malfunction that my husband fixed. But
Oh, well, that was
yeah,
lucky that he was able to fix it without having to call a service repairman. I can imagine that they are, just busy on calls all day long.
right. But it did make me think about the people who don't have air conditioning
Yeah,
and how tough this must be for them. So I hope
yeah,
they stay hydrated and stay safe because it's
absolutely.
really, really hot out there.
Yeah, it really is. And it's the heat wave, and there's no really end in sight. It's just going to be in the 90s for quite a while.
I know.
Um, but let's change the subject and I'm going to bring Jordan Costen on the screen, your guest for tonight. Hi, Jordan.
Okay.
Welcome to
Hello.
ZTV Live.
Thank you for having me.
It is great to have you. I'm going to let you two take your interview from here. So take it away, Jane.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. And hi, Jordan. Thanks for joining us tonight. So, as Susan said, Jordan Costen is the executive director and the founder of SafeSpace NOVA, which he'll tell you about. Um, in quick language, it's a safe space for kids, for youth who are LGBTQ plus. And so we're going to talk about his work, about the kids he supports, and then just questions about the LGBTA community. So as you know, we have the magic bowl of questions, and we're going to alternate between professional questions about Safe Space Nova and the LGBTQ plus community and questions about Jordan so we can get to know him better as a contributing and important member of Alexandria's community. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. First question says, what are systemic discriminatory issues that the LGBTQ plus community faces that the heterosexual community may be unaware of?
So I'm grateful actually this is the first question. So part of the issues that we deal with largely as a community, LGBTQ plus yet again, is about discrimination. So one of the accomplishments we've had as a state of Virginia was, and I believe we were we were the first Southern state that actually passed such legislation, was the Virginia CARES Act, which actually bans discrimination when it comes to employment, public accommodations, and housing. That's very, very big because there were issues where you could actually be fired for just literally being who you are as a transgender person, again, as a lesbian, as a gay person, or you were going out and seeking housing. Maybe somebody did not want to rent to you or even let you purchase a home for that reason, things of that nature. So I in answering that question, I first have to say we've grown great strides when they actually come to legislation that backs that up. But what we need to remember and strive for a society is when it comes to legislation, it actually helps change people's minds, but it's not something immediate, right? It's not the flick of a switch. So just so we actually have that legislation that actually bans that type of discrimination, we have to know that it actually still exists. So here in Alexandria, there are people who are obviously not going to be welcoming and affirming of that type of legislation and that type of mindset, and as a state of Virginia as well. So we just need to be aware that those issues still exist in our community. Again, because the legislation is here, because it doesn't actually ban those discriminations, does not mean it's not something that people are still participating in as willing participants to say, I don't want you to work here as a small business because you're actually gay, or I don't actually want to provide you service. I've actually seen as recently as in the past few weeks, once the legislation had actually been passed, a photographer in another part of Virginia said that he actually wanted to sue based on the fact that he did not want to feel like he was obligated to provide his services to an LGBTQ couple. So as a society, we need to be cognizant that and as Virginians, that legislation still exists, but so does discrimination, and we still have a ways to go.
I'm sorry you have to go through that. So legislation is a good first step.
Right, absolutely.
Onward. So, changing subjects, what is one thing you would do if you woke up tomorrow and you were invisible?
So, funny thing about this, working with youth, I know that they have their own idiosyncrasies about them and what they like to do, but honestly, I would just do a little bit of spying on the youth that we actually work with. They're all great kids, don't get me wrong.
You're going to creep on them.
I am, but I just want to see, make sure they're making the right choices and to see if I need to adjust. Because here's the funny thing. I've done this only for about past 4 years, but I'm a guy in my mid-30s. I'm accepting of my age. And I want to see if there are things that are going on that maybe they're uncomfortable telling me. Maybe there are issues when it comes to being at home, where there are issues where it's being at school, where that's actually being around friends. So I just kind of want to take a stance and take a listen. If there are things that we're not paying attention to that we need to be made aware of and make sure we focus more additional programming towards that, then let's do that. Not spying on private moments. Want to make sure I put that out there. But just maybe more in the socializing communal sense, like what are the things that they're talking about that we're not aware of, and maybe there's something we can be doing to better assist them.
Are any of your kids watching right now?
I believe so. I put it out to our entire audience of youth who actually come to our events. So I'm hoping so. Fingers crossed.
I hope they are too. Jordan, you're awesome. For the kids that are listening. Okay, so what is the biggest misunderstanding that straight people have regarding the LGBTQ plus community?
Another good question. Something that I come across quite often is there's this expectation that we're all the same, right? So even though we come in obviously different colors of the rainbow in terms of races and whatnot, or come from different religions and come from different countries and all of that, there's still a lot of expectation that I see from the majority of society that identifies as heterosexual, that they view us in one light. And my phrase to them is, just like there's a rainbow of people and comes of creed and nationality and all these different types of things that makes you an individual, it's the same way with us. So the best example I actually give is actually between myself and my husband. My husband is from New York. He loves football. He loves iced tea. And he loves watermelon. As simple as those things are, and they're all American, I honestly do not like iced tea. I detest watermelon, and football bores me. But you know what? That's okay. That's what makes us different. We're still two loving men who identify as homosexual, but we're all different. And the same thing exists across different religions and whatnot as have you. So I guess the biggest takeaway I want people to know is that we're all different. There's not one gay person you're going to meet that's similar to or the same as the next one. We all have different interests. We come from different places. We all arrive at this, but this is, and even more importantly, this is just one part of who we are. We are, same gender loving people, or maybe we love multiple genders, what have you, but that's just a small portion of who we are as individuals that walk there.
Absolutely. So last week, Dr. Herring was on the show. He's the city's public health director. I asked him what would be the worst job in the world for him. So I'm going to ask you a similar question. What is the worst job that you had in your life?
Wow. So a few years ago, so previous to starting SafeSpace NOVA, I'd been heavily entrenched in IT account management, fell in love with it. But a few years back, worked for a company that I was very proud of, but I was micromanaged. And the funny part about it was it wasn't micromanaged from my manager, and he actually reported to a director. There was actually 2 levels above me, a person who actually was the VP of an entire department. But if I literally went to go take a bathroom break or go and get coffee for 10 minutes, there would be a phone call coming in for me saying, "You're not at your desk, you're not at your desk." So I know it's the worst thing one can ever imagine, is being micromanaged. And I'm all about, I give everybody the freedom to do their job. That's why you were hired, right? That's why you have your jobs. That's why I'm doing what I do. Is I respect everybody's space and the autonomy to be able to do that. And when you kind of take that away from me, it takes a little piece out of me, and it makes me not the productive, efficient person that I am. So after just honestly a couple of months that I realized it just wasn't the place to be in. It was just time for me to find a place where I know I could live to my full potential and not be micromanaged by somebody.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks. Oh, by the way, viewers, if you have any questions, please send them in through the chat box. We'll either answer them on air, Jordan will answer them on air, or they'll be considered for tomorrow's story published in the Zebra called 5 More Questions with Jordan Costen. So, Jordan, my next question for you is, what are the behavioral health risks for the LGBTQ plus youth and adults versus the same risk for homosexual youth and adults?
Yet another good question. So the issues that we deal with, especially for LGBTQ youth, which is the target audience for SafeSpace NOVA, is suicidal ideation, depression, and anxiety. So this manifests in different ways, but it's because of reasons of, I have students whose parents are actually affirming. Are you all still there? Oh,
yes.
We have parents who are actually affirming of their child's identifying as transgender. And what you will find is that with a transgender youth, they will have what they call it's a birth name, they call it a dead name. But they choose what is their given name for the sex that they identify as. And if the parents are approving of that and the child is, and you go into school and then you find administrators, you find teachers, you find school nurses and counselors who are not respectful of that, what ends up happening is, and there's actually research that actually backs this up, is that you increase a child's anxiety and depression, one who's part of especially one who is transgender, simply because you're calling them what they call a dead name. You're calling them by something they no longer recognize. They tried to follow all the protocols and letting their teachers and administrators know this is a name I go by, my parents are actually approving. So that's just one way that this actually manifests. And that's one of the reasons that SafeSpace NOVA is actually here. We want to fight that issue. We want to let you know that there are others that exist that are just like you, who are coming out to themselves, they're trying to come out to their friends and their family members. And that helps decrease that anxiety, that depression, that suicidal ideation. So it's research said somewhere between 3 to 5 times more likely if you identify as any part of the LGBT community that you experience those types of mental illness issues. And we're just here to combat that.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds incredibly stressful. And so back to a personal question, how do you relieve stress?
Wow. So one of the things I actually do, I actually took this up very recently. I actually started doing an adult coloring book. So I was looking for something different to do. And I said, let me just think outside the box. I've heard friends talk about this. I've seen it actually even make the news. So I said, what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to go and get an adult coloring book. And I ordered it and ordered some colored pencils. And mind you, I have not colored in a coloring book in probably a decade and a half at the very least. But you know what? It's a real easy way to relieve stress. You have an impactful day, have a lot of different meetings and things like that. And it can be stress, wear and tear on you as an individual, emotionally, whatnot. So it's a way to kind of free my mind and say, all I have to worry about is picking your pretty colors and just coloring in between the lines. So that's my latest hobby that I've taken over that helps relieve my stress.
And that's actually showing on camera right now. You did that, right? You colored that in?
I absolutely did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what is it? Speaking of, is it safer now to be LGBTQ plus, or was it safer 20 years ago?
So when I get asked this question, it's honestly not a hard yes and a hard no. There are a lot of factors that come into play. So are you under 18 years old or not? Meaning you're still generally speaking, you're still under your parents' household. Is your parent going to be affirming of you being part of the LGBT community? Or if you're an adult, have you come out? We actually do find that there are people who are actually coming out after being in their first marriage to opposite sex person, realizing that they're part of the LGBT community. So there are a lot of layers and factors that actually go into this, even more broadly in the community that you live in. We find that small towns across America are still not as affirming as bigger places like your metropolitan areas like in New York, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. So the short and sweet of it is we do have legislation and policies in place that are more protective of the LGBTQ community. We are able to, as of 2015, you can actually now legally marry across any state in the United States in general. So that's actually a huge step forward for us. But it just depends on where you're coming from, your background and whatnot, because you can actually find even in a overwhelmingly welcome place like Alexandria, where I've lived for over a decade now, that I'm still dealing with youth that I meet here who are part of families who are not accepting, so it may be more difficult for them. So I wish there was a better way to answer it. It just kind of depends on the background of the people in terms of where you are, what cultural background you have, what family you're dealing with and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, if you could trade lives with anyone for one day, who would you trade lives with, and who would you be and why?
Wow, that's a really good question. The person I would actually be, and this is very random of me, but I'm very much a reality show person. I love watching reality shows.
Oh, no.
I know. I love watching reality shows. So for me, the person I would actually want to be is, and I do admit that I openly binge the Kardashians, but to know what it's like to actually be one of the Kardashians, and honestly, it's not actually Kim who's the most prominent and the one who's facing out there the most. It's actually like a Chloe. So it's somebody who's on the scene. People know her. She has money. She has wealth. So knowing it's like to have to be that person that's in front of the camera, have wealth so you can actually do what you want to do. I'm very much outside of my SafeSpace NOVA bubble, somebody who actually likes to be more inhibitive and to himself and not in front of the camera, so to speak, but to have that lifestyle. What is it like? And how can I train myself to be a better person, a better speaker, a better executive director, if you will, but putting myself out there in the shoes of somebody else who has to do that at all times, walking out your front door, getting your mail, so to speak. So,
Jordan, I'm totally with you. I would love to be any Kardashian for just a day, probably Kris Jenner.
Yeah.
Just see what it's like. I just want the jewelry. I want the jewelry, and I want the dinners and the clothes and the handbags and the money.
Yeah.
None of the problems. So what advice would you give to somebody who wants to come out but is afraid to?
Biggest piece of advice is seek others. You're not alone. I can never say that enough. I want anybody and everybody who is watching us right now, if you are struggling, no matter which age range you are and what have you, I want you to know that you're not alone. Again, another reason we created SafeSpace NOVA so that you know that you're not alone as a youth. There are other youth who are going and experiencing this across Northern Virginia, across the world, across the United States. So if you're struggling, seek out those groups. We have plenty of organizations that cater to people based off of, again, back to religion, back to your age, race, what have you. But seek out those other individuals who are either going through the struggle themselves, so maybe you can lean on each other, or somebody who's actually gone through that struggle and makes it aside, so you can seek support, get some assistance from them. How do they best do it? What was the best practices they can actually share? So don't feel like you have to go it alone and deal with those, what may be negative images and self-affirmations that you're going through. Seek out others who are going through the same thing and seek out their support. That's why it's there.
Okay, thank you. And again, viewers, if you want to ask Jordan a question, just type it into the chat box. We'll answer it now or maybe tomorrow on 5 more questions with Jordan Costen. So, Jordan, from your vantage point, what can Alexandrians do to make our community stronger and better?
Right. So from that perspective, when the key word here, again, and something else I would love for people to walk away with is allies. A lot of people are looking at the LGBT community from afar and realizing the issues and legislation just passed, the Virginia CARES Act. But what's most important is that you go and seek out members of the community and get their perspective. You have the best perspective when you're actually sharing, breaking bread, having a drink, having a coffee, or what have you, sharing dinner with a friend, or maybe it's even somebody you don't know, but how about you understand their side of the story? For a lot of friends that I've met living in this Alexandria area for over a decade now, there are plenty of people who still don't actually know anybody who's part of the LGBT community. So what I do is I encourage them, seek me out, send me an email, give me a call. I'm more than happy to meet with you, talk to you, email with you, and just share with you what this situation has actually been for me, for others that I've actually met upon my life journey. So when you become an ally, that means that you've met with that person or groups of people or different people, part of the LGBT community, and you're understanding. So when you're going out, when you're marching, not just for Black Lives Matter, but maybe Transgender Lives Matter or LGBTQ Lives Matter, you have a better understanding of what their issues are and why it's so important to fight for us and our rights.
Okay, well, we haven't really talked about SafeSpace NOVA, the nonprofit that you started 4 years ago. So can you tell us a little bit about it? How many youth do you serve? What kind of programming do you do? And I know there's a great picture that Susan's going to put up in a few seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. So SafeSpace NOVA was founded about 4 years ago. It was a brainchild of mine. And the reason it came about was I'm coming from Atlanta, Georgia myself, coming through the coming out experience and realizing that I was homosexual, was heterosexual. I believe I didn't see anybody else that was like me. And by that, I mean just somebody else who was struggling with the idea of coming out. So I didn't feel like there was family I necessarily could have turned to in that moment. There weren't friends I felt like I could have talked to, teachers, a mentor, anybody. So we wanted to create that space, and that was the catalyst for SafeSpace NOVA. And when I came up with the idea, I said, let me just do a lay of the land. Let me look around and look across the entire area of Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., of course, and Maryland, and say, who is actually catering to these youth? And when I looked around, there's an organization, Smile, which is quite wonderful. I'm sorry, Smile, in Washington, D.C. called Smile that does this. But there was nobody. We have a lot of organizations that cater to the adults who identify as LGBTQ. But nobody was looking after these youth. So I said, you know what? Maybe I'll take that under my wing. Maybe this really is something I can push forward. And I'm a person that, unfortunately, who tends to overthink things. So it took me a little bit of time before 2016. It actually took me 1 to 2 years to actually think through, what is our mission statement going to be? Who's our target audience? What type of programs are we going to build in? And how are we going to get money raised? So I did a lot of thinking. And we came to, SafeSpace NOVA, building this organization from the ground up. And it's been extremely, extremely wonderful. In terms of our target audience, we target teenagers, 14 to 18 years old, across all of Northern Virginia. So it's Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax County, Prince William County, Loudoun County. We host, and our first and most prominent program is social activities. What does this do? We rent out a space. We've done Top Golf, Miniature Monster Golf. We've done laser tag. You name it. We've done a ton of different events. We rent out a space for the youth to come, congregate, enjoy some food, and just have a good time. And it's essentially a safe space. So that's what we've done for the past 4 years. Recently, we've actually launched another program. It's actually called Y'all's, and it's teaching kids about leadership and advocacy. So if there are issues that you actually want to fight for, we're teaching you how you best go about that, how you put presentations together that have those striking points. And then we want to guide you towards, hey, meet with your local city council member, your council person, your local delegate or state representative. So we want to teach you what it is to advocate for yourself and go fight for what you actually think is right for you and the community as a whole. So again, we've been doing that for 4 years. Next year, we were going to do this year. Unfortunately, got delayed, but we are actually looking to launch our first LGBTQ mentoring program, where we pair a youth with an adult, and they can actually learn from each other via a 10-week program. So a lot of fun things in the works, a lot of things to go, but we're just happy about where we've come today.
Thank you for what you do. Now I know you mentioned your husband. You also have an 80-pound roommate. So let's meet Bo.
So Bo is our loving English bulldog, all 80 pounds of him. About 2-3 years ago, fortunately, I found out we were cat people, and I found out I was allergic to cats. So our last cat had passed on, and we just love having pets. We love inviting them in. We always go to a shelter to get our pets for those who are, need a home. And we went there, the local animal shelter in Alexandria, which is literally maybe 8 to 10 minutes from my house, just randomly went there and saw this lovely bulldog, fell in love with him. He fell in love with me and my husband. And next thing I know, we were whisking him away and saying, "You must have you, we must have you." So he's lovely. He's funny. He is lazy above anything else, if I have to be quite honest. But again, he's very loving. And all it takes is just, one bad day and he's there with a good old smile and a bone in his mouth or one of his chew toys. And he's there to just kind of make you smile and perk up your day.
But is he spoiled?
He is absolutely spoiled. I think he's the most spoiled animal I have ever met. My husband, up until recently, I finally convinced my husband to stop. He used to actually have a box that came with treats, like hard treats and toys, once a month. And we actually have what is a toy chest full of toys that he's accumulated over these months. I said, this is getting ridiculous. He is one dog in our house, but yet he had, I want to say, somewhere between 15 and 20 toys that he would litter all around the house. He said, I'm done with this toy. I'll go to that one and just litter them around the house. So, yeah, extremely spoiled, to say the least.
Well, Bo lives a good life.
Absolutely.
So, believe it or not, we're almost out of time. I have a couple more questions. How do you deal, or what do you say to parents who are struggling with their kids' sexual and gender identity?
Wow. You know what? It's the same advice I gave earlier. It's seek out assistance from those who are going through the same thing. Look for that support. So there's an organization that I'm part of called PFLAG. It's a national organization that has different chapters in different areas. They're actually, their headquarters is based in Washington, D.C. And we actually have a PFLAG Alexandria where I've been a youth facilitator for maybe the past 4, 5, 6 months at the most. And the parents come together in a support and saying, you know what, I don't know how to deal with this. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no rule book to this, obviously. But all you can do, if anything else, is seek out the support, lean on each other, and share experiences. And from that, you can actually learn from one another how to be accepting, how to move forward, how to be loving of your child without bringing in your own discriminatory thoughts and things like that.
Okay, I can't even segue into this next question because it's so random. So here we go.
Okay.
If you had to go into the witness protection program, where would you go and what would your new name be?
Okay, good question. So for some strange reason, when people get my name wrong, Jordan, which is, in my opinion, a very common name, they will say Justin instead of Jordan, and they will immediately correct themselves. So I would just want to know what it's like to just be Justin for one day and know that's my name that I'm at least supposed to go by, because I've been called that I cannot tell you how many times over the past 3, 5, 8 years of my life. So Justin would be the name, still a J, but not my legal name. Secondly, would actually go to Hawaii. I'm a huge lover of nature and more specifically the ocean. I just feel like it's a calming force. So Hawaii, I went there and visited actually with a close friend of mine. It was just such a wonderful experience. So if any place I could go to where I can just enjoy a beautiful, nice, clear ocean on the beach, it would actually be Hawaii. So that's where I go.
Okay. Well, how do you respond to people who say identifying as homosexual is a choice?
So instead of being antagonistic right off the bat, you just ask a simple question. I came out the womb, and for me, I identify as African American. There was no choice in the matter. This is something that just came to be based off of my parents and their racial backgrounds. I did not have a choice. I can try to identify, or if I want to, as some other race, but I identify as African American. That's how it came out. It is absolutely no different than that. People often think it's a choice, and they often call it a lifestyle. Those two things are something that generally the LGBT community frowns upon in terms of conversation and how you think about us. And it's never a choice. It's just, this is how we live our lives. It's coming to terms with what is our truth. The truth is, I am sexually attracted to X, or I identify as X because that is what I feel. That is not who I know who I am. And honestly, it's all about living your truth. Living and not saying that is living a falsehood in some sense. So we just want to always encourage that you're living your truth. And there's not really a choice in the matter. It's just coming to the decision that I'm just living my truth. And this is truly a part, not all, but a part of who I am and acceptance of that part of me.
So what kind of response do you get when you've explained that to people? Are people generally understanding? Do they insist that, no, you're wrong? Or does it depend on who you're speaking with?
Honestly, it depends on who I'm speaking with. Some people actually get it. It's very quick. Oh, you know what? I need to like noodle on this for a second. That's sometimes what I say, but I need to noodle on this. Maybe that makes a lot more sense. Other people, based off of maybe how they were raised in terms of a household, parents, religion, and what have you, they're going to be stuck in their ways. And you know what? I'm okay with that. At the end of the day, all I ask is just to be respected. I'm not saying you have to think of, homosexual or, somebody being transgender or something as you have to mentally understand in your mind how this works. We're never generally as a community asking you to say, you know what, you need to know what this experience is because you're not walking in their shoes. You're not living it yourself, which is okay with this. All we ask is for you to be respectful, and that's okay. I'm never generally trying to change your mind. I'm just telling you my viewpoint and how I understand things. You can be accepting or you can't. That's up to you. The choice is yours.
I have one more question, then I'll ask, of course, if there's anything else you want to say. What are the most annoying LGBTQ plus stereotypes that heterosexual people have?
Wow. We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, and it's something I kind of dealt with growing up myself. But even in today's world, a lot of people tend to think of gay men as these overly effeminate individuals. And so there's somebody who wants to be women or, well, actually, no, that's the best way to phrase it. There's somebody who wants to be women or act as such in a female manner when this is just naturally who I am. However I was raised, whatever the situation was, this is naturally who I am. But everybody is not the same. So there are some people with expectations walking in saying, oh my gosh, I've met people who were, identify 100% as homosexual, but they have people just automatically assuming, and there's this assumption across society that, a homosexual or somebody who's part of the LGBTQ community in general, there's going to be some red flag that automatically tells you you're going to always be the wiser person and know that and be able to pick it out. That's not always going to be the case. Again, we're a rainbow of people. We come in all shades, we come in all religions, we come in all walks of life of how we actually even dress or act or a mannerism. So always keep that in mind when you're thinking about broader community. You never know who next to you could actually be part of the homosexual or LGBTQ community. So when you're mindful of that, you end up not being somebody who's making cracks and making discriminatory remarks when there could be somebody who has a full husband and or family and says, you know what, hey, I am part of the LGBT community, just so you know. I know you might have thought so because of how I present or what my mannerisms are, but you got to be a little bit more open-minded to know that we exist in all different walks and forms of life and mannerisms.
Okay, Jordan, thank you so much. What a great half hour this has been. Thank you for what you do for the youth and for the adults here in Alexandria. Is there anything else you want to say before we turn it back over to Susan?
Yeah, so two quick things. One is when it comes to SafeSpace NOVA, we've been around for 4 years, but we're 100% volunteer organization. So what does that look like? We have a team of about 8 people. None of us take home a paycheck. This is all something we do outside of our normal working hours, but we enjoy it. We're passionate. That's what we actually do it. So that means that every single dollar that actually comes through for SafeSpace NOVA goes back into our programming, goes back into the youth. That's what's most important. So you got to remember that. So the donations that come in are what sustain us to keep us alive to do the programming. It doesn't sustain my lifestyle. It doesn't do that for the rest of the staff. So that's very, very key and something I want everybody to just know about. If you want to donate, you can always find us on our social media handles of SafeSpace NOVA and be directed to our webpage, www.safespacenova.org. So that's really, really prominent with us. The second thing I must mention is we can't do this alone. And by that, I mean, it's not just about SafeSpace NOVA, but it's about partnering with other organizations, such as Zebra Magazine. So we do a number of partnerships to continuously get the word out that we're here, we exist, and we're not going anywhere. So it's partnering with organizations like Listen, like Alexandrian Arlington Gay and Lesbian Association, like Nova Pride, like Alexandria LGBT Task Force. It's important that not just recognition gets to SafeSpace NOVA, but for these other businesses and organizations that lend us a hand helping us get the word out so that more youth can know that we exist and come to our programming.
Great. All right, thank you. Okay, Susan, back to you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. All three of us are on the screen right now. And Jane, thank you for introducing us to Jordan. And Jordan, thank you so much for coming on the show and for beginning such a wonderfully needed nonprofit and organization for the youth. I mean, it's just such a tough time when you're kind of realizing that there's something different. You know that you're thinking a little bit different from other people. So how wonderful to know that you're not alone and that there are so many other people out there for them. So thanks for providing that safe space for them. And it's a great name for it really describes what you're doing.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, Jane, thank you so much. We will see you next Wednesday.
You bet.
Okay.
Thanks
Take
again.
care. All right. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another wonderful edition of ZTV Live. Tomorrow night, we have the Virginia Amos show, and Virginia's guest will be Kelly Grant of ALX Community, another wonderful Alexandria community leader. So we look forward to meeting Kelly and welcoming Virginia back. And then next week, we'll have another full lineup of shows for you to join as well. If you have any ideas for shows, subjects, guests, anything that you'd like to see on ZTV Live, please let us know. Drop us a line at editor@thezebra.org. We really would love to put on here what you want to see. And we welcome and thank you so much for joining us every night. And in the meantime, until we see you tomorrow, be the good news in someone's life.